The words hit me like a physical blow. My brother Marcus stood in the conference room of our family business, arms crossed, that infuriating smirk plastered across his face. "Your signature is already on it, Emily," he said, his voice dripping with false confidence. "You agreed to the new partnership terms last month. It's done, legally binding." I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The contract he shoved toward me landed on the polished table with a heavy thud. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just a disagreement between siblings. This wasn't another argument about business strategy or client management. This was betrayal. Written in black and white. Documented. Official. I never signed this," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my attempt to stay calm. I stared at the pages, at the signature that looked almost like mine but wasn't quite right. The loop in the E was too round, the tail on the Y too short. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. "Try telling that to the bank. Try explaining it to our investors. The contract's already been filed, the terms are active. You're out of primary decision-making and I'm in full control." Panic surged through me, hot and suffocating, but underneath it something else stirred, something stubborn and fierce. I grabbed the papers with shaking hands, scanning the terms I supposedly agreed to. There had to be a way to prove him wrong. There had to be. Before we go any further, do well to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments section what time it is in your location right now. I locked myself in my home office that night, spreading the contract across my desk under the bright lamp. Every page, every clause, every word. Something felt wrong beyond just the signature. The dates were the first thing I noticed. The contract claimed I'd agreed to terms on March 15th, but I had been in Seattle that entire week for a client conference. I had flight receipts, hotel confirmations, meeting schedules with timestamps. There was no way I could have signed anything in our office on that date. Then I noticed the clauses themselves, specific terms that contradicted discussions we'd had months earlier. Provisions that gave Marcus unprecedented control over company funds, client relationships, and strategic decisions. Things I would never have agreed to. Not in a million years. The language was different too. Phrases that didn't match the drafts we discussed with our lawyer, sections that had clearly been altered after the initial proposal. My brother hadn't just forged my signature. He'd falsified the entire agreement. Or tried to. But as I stared at the papers, a realization bloomed in my chest. The original terms still existed. Somewhere. And if I could find them, if I could prove what we'd actually agreed to versus what Marcus had fabricated, everything would change. I pulled out my laptop and started searching through emails. Somewhere in my digital archives was the truth. I just had to find it before Marcus could do any more damage. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Not the family lawyer Marcus had probably already corrupted with his version of events. My personal attorney, Patricia Hammond, someone I'd retained separately 3 years ago when I'd first started suspecting my brother's financial irregularities. "Patricia," I said the moment she answered, "I need you to look at something. Urgently." I scanned the contract and sent it to her secure email, waited in tense silence while she reviewed it. When she spoke again, her voice was sharp and focused. "Emily, this is serious fraud, forgery of a signature, falsification of contractual terms. If the original agreement can be verified and proved different from this document, your brother is facing criminal charges, not just civil liability. Criminal." My pulse quickened. I wasn't just imagining things. This was real, provable, actionable. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Find everything," Patricia replied. "Every email discussing the original terms, every draft version, every witness who was present during negotiations. Build an irrefutable timeline that proves you never agreed to what's in this contract." She paused. "But Emily, be careful. If Marcus is willing to forge legal documents, he's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. I wasn't defenseless. I had leverage. I had truth on my side. I just had to be smart about how I used it. Marcus had always underestimated me. Always seen me as the younger sister who'd go along with whatever he decided. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he'd been. The confrontation happened at Sunday dinner. Our mother's house, where we gathered weekly out of obligation more than affection. Marcus arrived late, confident as always. Our mother Helen greeted him warmly, barely acknowledging me. The family dynamics had always been clear. Marcus was the golden child. I was the afterthought. We sat down to eat, maintaining the pretense of normalcy. Then I set the contract on the table beside my plate. "We need to talk about this," I said quietly. Marcus glanced at it, then at me, his expression carefully neutral. "What about it? Everything's in order." "You lied," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You forged my signature. The dates don't match. The terms aren't what we discussed. You falsified this entire agreement." He smiled, that same arrogant smirk that had infuriated me since childhood. "Prove it. The contract is filed with the state, notarized, official. It's just business, Emily. Stop being so emotional. You can't fight documented facts." Our mother watched silently, her expression cold and calculating. Then she spoke, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disapproval reserved only for me. "Emily, Marcus has worked very hard to grow this business. Perhaps you should trust his judgment more. Fighting him on this only makes you look difficult." My heart sank. This wasn't just Marcus. This was a family alliance. Mother had always supported him, always taken his side in every dispute. She'd probably known about the forged contract. Might have even helped plan it. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I have a lawyer now. A good one. And she thinks this is fraud. Criminal fraud. The room went silent. Marcus's smirk faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. Enough to know I'd struck a nerve. Enough to know he wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. That night, I went through every email I'd saved over the past 2 years. Every text message. Every voicemail. Building a timeline of our business discussions and negotiations. Around midnight, I found it. A single email chain from 4 months ago, discussing proposed changes to the partnership structure. Marcus had sent a draft with new terms. I had replied clearly, explicitly, stating my objections to several clauses. "I won't agree to giving you unilateral control over client contracts," I'd written. "We need equal authority in all major decisions. That's non-negotiable." Marcus had responded, "Fine, we'll adjust the terms before finalizing anything." But the contract he'd filed, the one with my forged signature, included exactly the clauses I'd rejected. He hadn't adjusted anything. He'd just waited until he thought he could get away with forcing them through. It was small evidence, but it was real. It was documented proof that I had never agreed to the terms he claimed I'd signed off on. A crack in his carefully constructed lie. I forwarded the email chain to Patricia with a note. Found the first piece. There's more. I know there is. Then I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Marcus had built his scheme carefully, but he'd made mistakes, left traces. And I was going to find every single one of them until his entire, fabricated story collapsed under the weight of truth. The unexpected ally appeared 2 days later. My cousin Sophia called me out of nowhere. We'd never been particularly close, but we'd always been cordial at family gatherings. "Emily," she said carefully, "I heard about the contract dispute with Marcus. I need to tell you something." My breath caught. "What?" "You know the original partnership agreement? The one you and Marcus drafted before all these recent changes? I kept a copy. You sent it to me last year when you were asking for advice about business structures. I never deleted it." Hope surged through me so powerfully I had to sit down. "You still have it? The original terms?" "Everything," Sophia confirmed. "The version before Marcus started pushing for all those changes you didn't want. The one that shows equal partnership and shared decision-making authority. I can send it to you right now." Tears pricked my eyes. Someone remembered. Someone had proof. "Sophia, why are you helping me?" I asked quietly. She was silent for a moment. "Because I've watched Marcus manipulate people for years. Watched him use family loyalty as a weapon. Watched him gaslight you at every family gathering. I'm tired of it, and I think you deserve better than being erased from your own company." The file arrived in my email 5 minutes later. I opened it with trembling hands. There it was, the original terms, dated, signed by both of us months before the forged contract. Proof that everything Marcus claimed was a lie. I forwarded it immediately to Patricia. Then I saved multiple copies in different locations. This wasn't just a crack in Marcus's armor anymore. This was a sledgehammer. I decided to test the waters, carefully, strategically. One of our major business partners, a man named Harrison, who'd worked with us for 5 years, had been copied on the falsified contract. I sent him an email, keeping my tone professional and neutral. Harrison, I wanted to follow up on the recent partnership structure changes. I noticed some discrepancies between the filed contract and our earlier discussions. Could you review the attached original terms and let me know if you remember these being our agreed framework? I attached Sophia's copy of the real agreement. Then I waited. The response came within an hour. Harrison called me directly, his voice tense with confusion. Emily, what the hell is going on? This original contract is completely different from what Marcus sent me last month. The decision-making structure, the profit distribution, the authority over client relationships, everything is different. My heart leapt. You noticed that too? Noticed? Emily, these aren't just minor changes. If these were the real original terms, then the current contract is... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. That's what I'm trying to verify, I said quietly. I think there may have been some unauthorized changes made without proper agreement from both partners. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. If you need someone to testify about what the original partnership structure looked like, I'll do it. I've worked with both of you long enough to know your operating style. The current contract doesn't match how you've run things. Something's wrong. My first victory, small, unseen by Marcus, but very real. The foundation of his lie was starting to crumble, and he didn't even know it yet. Marcus noticed Harrison's call. I was in the office the next day when he stormed into my workspace, his face flushed with barely controlled anger. What did you tell Harrison? He demanded. What did you do? I looked up from my computer, keeping my expression carefully neutral. But inside, my heart was racing. His panic was showing. The smooth, confident mask was cracking. I sent him the original partnership terms, I said calmly. Asked him to verify which version matched his understanding of our agreement. Why? Is there a problem? You had no right to share confidential documents with clients, Marcus snapped. But his voice was too loud, too defensive. Fear flickered across his face for just a second before he suppressed it. They're not confidential, I replied. They're our legitimate business structure. Unless you think the original terms are somehow problematic? He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't find a response that wouldn't implicate himself further. This isn't over, he finally said. You're making a mistake challenging me on this. Am I? I asked. Or did you make the mistake when you thought I wouldn't notice the forgery? He left without answering, slamming my office door hard enough to rattle the walls. I sat back in my chair, my hands shaking slightly. But this time the shaking wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline, from the realization that Marcus had overplayed his hand. He'd been so confident in his scheme that he hadn't prepared for the possibility that I'd fight back, that I'd find proof, that I'd refuse to just accept his version of reality. His panic meant I was winning, and we both knew it. That evening, I went through the original agreement line by line, comparing it to Marcus's falsified version. That's when I found it. Hidden in the middle of page 7, buried in legal language most people would skim over, was a clause that changed everything. In all matters of significant business impact, including but not limited to client contracts exceeding $50,000, partnership restructuring, or major capital expenditures, decisions require unanimous consent of all partners. In the event of disagreement, Emily Foster retains final decision-making authority as founding partner and primary stakeholder. Final authority, me, not Marcus. The original agreement gave me the ultimate power in disputes. It was a clause we'd included at the very beginning, back when Marcus had been the one worried of being pushed out. Back when I'd been more established and he'd needed protection. He'd agreed to it because he'd never thought he'd actually need to worry about me exercising that authority. Now he'd removed it entirely from the forged contract, replaced it with language that gave him unilateral control. The power shift was instantaneous if I could prove the original terms were legitimate. And thanks to Sophia's copy, time-stamped and preserved, I could. I called Patricia immediately. I found it. The clause he was trying to erase. The one that proves exactly why he needed to forge a new contract in the first place. Patricia's voice was sharp with interest. Send it to me, now. The momentum was building. Every piece of evidence, every witness, every preserved document was constructing an unassailable case. Marcus had thought he was being clever. Instead, he'd left a trail of proof that would destroy him. My sister Vanessa called the next morning, middle child, perpetual fence-sitter, always trying to keep the peace at the expense of what was right. "Emily," she said, her voice carrying that familiar pleading tone, "I heard about the contract dispute. Don't push Marcus too far on this. He's not handling the pressure well." "The pressure of getting caught committing fraud?" I asked. Vanessa sighed. "Don't be dramatic. Look, I know you're upset, but is this really worth tearing the family apart? Can't you two just compromise? Find some middle ground?" I almost laughed. Compromise. Always the answer when someone wanted me to back down. Never when Marcus needed to be held accountable. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "Marcus forged my signature on a legal document. He falsified contract terms to steal control of a company I helped build. There's no middle ground between truth and lies." "He's dangerous when he's cornered," she warned. "I'm just trying to protect you." "Then stand with me against him," I replied. "Help me prove the truth instead of enabling his lies." Silence, long and uncomfortable. "I can't do that." Vanessa finally said, "He's our brother. Family comes first." "Then why doesn't that apply to me?" I asked quietly. "Why is family loyalty only for him?" She hung up without answering. I sat there holding my phone, understanding fully now what I was up against. Not just Marcus. The entire family structure that had protected and enabled him for decades. But I wasn't the scared little sister anymore. I wasn't the one who'd be pressured into silence. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. Dangerous when cornered? Maybe. But now I had the upper hand, and I intended to use it. The next client meeting was scheduled for Thursday, a routine quarterly review with 3 of our biggest accounts. Marcus had assumed I'd skip it, stay quiet, avoid confrontation. He was wrong. I arrived early, dressed professionally, carrying a leather portfolio that contained carefully selected documents. When Marcus walked in and saw me sitting at the conference table, his expression darkened. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "This is my meeting." "Our meeting," I corrected calmly. "I'm still a partner, still responsible for these client relationships, or did your new contract eliminate that too?" The clients arrived before he could respond. We proceeded with the normal agenda. Financial updates, project timelines, future planning. Then I made my move. "Before we conclude," I said, pulling out documents, "I want to clarify the partnership structure for our records. There's been some confusion recently about decision-making authority." I slid copies of the original agreement toward each client. "This is our founding partnership framework. Equal authority, collaborative decision-making, unanimous consent required for major changes." Marcus went rigid. The clients scanned the documents, then looked between us with growing concern. "This is different from the structure outline Marcus sent us last month," one client said slowly. "Quite different." "Exactly," I replied, keeping my voice steady and professional, "which is why I'm requesting we all operate from the original terms until any changes are properly agreed upon by both partners, through legitimate means." The gasps were subtle but real. Professional people understanding immediately that something was very wrong. Marcus stammered, tried to laugh it off, attempted to redirect the conversation, but the damage was done. My authority was suddenly undeniable. The clients now knew there were competing versions of reality, and I'd just presented documented proof of mine. Marcus cornered me in the parking lot after the meeting. His face was flushed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Don't make this ugly, Emily," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You're embarrassing yourself, embarrassing the family. Just accept the new terms and move on." I met his gaze without flinching. "The terms you forged? The signature you faked? Those terms?" He stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against documented evidence. Notarized, official, filed with the state." "We'll see," I replied calmly. The original terms in my portfolio felt like armor. Proof he didn't know I had. Proof that would demolish every lie he'd constructed. "I'm warning you," Marcus said. "Drop this. Walk away or you'll regret it." I smiled, though my heart was hammering. "I don't think so. Because here's what you don't understand, Marcus. I'm not the little sister you can bully anymore. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not backing down." I walked past him to my car, feeling his glare burning into my back. But I didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing any hesitation. The original terms spoke louder than any threats he could make, and soon, very soon, everyone would hear exactly what they had to say. Marcus had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out. I became obsessed with collecting evidence. Every email between Marcus and me over the past 2 years, every text message discussing business decisions, every voicemail, every meeting note. I created a comprehensive timeline in a spreadsheet. Dates, topics, decisions made, exact words used. Every instance where I'd expressed disagreement with his proposals. Every time he'd promised to adjust terms before finalizing anything. Every lie he'd told was now documented with timestamps and direct quotes. Patricia helped me organize everything into a legal brief. "This is extraordinary," she said during our meeting. "You've essentially documented every step of his scheme without even realizing you were doing it." The emails were particularly damning. Marcus pushing for changes, me resisting, him agreeing to compromises. Then the forged contract showing none of those compromises had been honored. Every attempt to pressure me into agreement was now proof of his manipulation. Every promise he'd made and broken was evidence of intent to defraud. "The pattern is undeniable," Patricia continued. "Systematic pressure, false promises, then unilateral action without consent. Any judge will see this for what it is." I looked at the thick folder of evidence sitting on her desk. Years of my brother's lies and manipulation preserved digitally. Proof that couldn't be argued away or explained. "When do we use this?" I asked. Patricia smiled. "Soon. Let him keep digging himself deeper. The more confident he gets, the more mistakes he'll make. Right now, you have the advantage of him not knowing how much proof you have." So I waited, collected more evidence, built an unshakable case, and watched Marcus continue his charade, completely unaware that every move he made was being documented and cataloged for the reckoning that was coming. Our mother intervened 3 days later. She arrived at my apartment unannounced, her expression stern and disapproving. "Emily, this has gone on long enough," Helen said, not bothering with pleasantries. "You're tearing this family apart over business disagreements. It's time to compromise. Keep the peace." I stared at her. Compromise on fraud, on forged signatures, on systematic theft of a company I built? "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped. "Marcus has worked hard for this business. He deserves recognition. He deserves authority. You should support him instead of fighting him at every turn." The truth crystallized in that moment with painful clarity. Her loyalty had always been with Marcus, not because he was right, but because he was her favorite. Because in her mind, his success mattered more than my rights. "He forged my signature, Mother," I said quietly. "He falsified legal documents. That's not a disagreement. That's a crime." "Family doesn't send family to jail," Helen replied coldly. "That's not how we handle things. You apologize to your brother. You accept the new partnership structure, and you stop this vendetta before you destroy everything." "Vendetta?" I repeated. "I'm defending myself from fraud." "You're being selfish," she said. "This has always been your problem, Emily. Always putting yourself first instead of thinking about the family." I realized then that no amount of evidence would change her mind. She'd made her choice long ago. Marcus was the golden child, and I was expendable. But her opinion didn't matter anymore. The law didn't care about maternal favoritism. The courts wouldn't accept forged signatures just because a mother wanted to protect her son. "You should leave," I said. She did, slamming the door behind her. And I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just clarity about exactly who I could trust. The list was shorter than I'd hoped, but it was honest. The real confrontation came 2 weeks later. I'd scheduled a meeting with Marcus under the pretense of discussing a compromise. Patricia had advised me to have everything documented, so I'd set up a recording device in the conference room. Legal, since I'd informed Marcus via email that all our business discussions would be recorded for accuracy. He'd ignored the notification, probably thinking it was a bluff. It wasn't. Marcus arrived confident, that same smirk firmly in place. "Finally coming to your senses?" he asked, settling into his chair. I slid a thick folder across the table. "Let's discuss the evidence I've collected." His smirk faltered as he opened it. Inside were copies of everything. The original partnership agreement with Sophia's timestamp, Emails showing my explicit rejection of his proposed changes, text messages where he'd promised to adjust terms, Harrison's statement about the discrepancies, the forged contract with signature analysis showing the forgery. Marcus's face went pale, then flushed dark red. "Where did you get all this?" he demanded. "Every alteration, every lie, every attempt at manipulation, it's all documented here," I said calmly. "Your scheme is over, Marcus. You're caught." "This doesn't prove anything," he blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "I can explain all of this." "Can you explain the forged signature?" I asked. "Can you explain removing the clause that gave me final authority? Can you explain why the contract you filed doesn't match any version we actually discussed?" Marcus stood abruptly, the chair scraping violently against the floor. "You think you're so smart. You think you can challenge me and win. I've been running this business for years while you played at being important." "Actually," I replied, "I've been building this business. You've been taking credit for my work while planning to push me out entirely." His composure broke completely. The mask was gone. All that remained was rage and fear and the dawning realization that he'd lost. The first real cracks had appeared, and they were spreading fast. Marcus tried one last desperate maneuver. He called an emergency board meeting, invited investors and advisors, people he thought he could sway with his usual charm and manipulation. He was going to argue a technicality, claim that even if signatures were disputed, verbal agreements had been made. That intent mattered more than documentation. I'd expected it. Patricia had warned me he'd try something like this. "Let him make his case," she'd advised. "Then we'll demolish it with facts." The meeting convened in our main conference room. 12 people around the table, all watching the siblings with varying degrees of discomfort. Marcus presented first, smooth, confident, painting a picture of misunderstanding and miscommunication. "Emily and I discussed these changes extensively," he said. "She understood the need for streamlined leadership. The paperwork was just a formality to reflect agreements we'd already made verbally." He made it sound reasonable, professional. A simple administrative matter blown out of proportion. Then Patricia stood up. "May I present counter-evidence?" Marcus's confident expression flickered. He hadn't expected my lawyer to attend. "This is a family business matter," he tried. "Not appropriate for legal intervention." "Forgery is always appropriate for legal intervention," Patricia replied coolly. She distributed packets to every person at the table. "What you have in front of you is a comprehensive timeline of all communications between Marcus and Emily regarding partnership structure changes." The room went silent as people read. Every email, every text, every instance of Emily explicitly rejecting the terms Marcus later claimed she'd agreed to. "As you can see," Patricia continued, "there was no verbal agreement, only systematic pressure and eventual fraud when that pressure failed." A board member looked up, face grim. This is serious. If these dates are accurate, then the current contract is invalid." Marcus tried to argue, to deflect, but the facts were undeniable. The technicality he'd hoped would save him had just been obliterated by documented truth. The confirmation came 3 days later. Patricia had the original contract independently verified by a third-party legal firm. Every clause, every term, every detail. "The original agreement is completely legitimate," the verification report stated, "properly executed, properly witnessed, and properly filed with all relevant authorities." Furthermore, the more recent contract submitted by Marcus Foster shows signs of document tampering and signature irregularity. Patricia called me with the news. "You have full authority now, Emily. Not just moral authority, but legal authority. The original contract supersedes the forged one. Marcus can't touch anything without your explicit written consent." The power had shifted completely. Everything Marcus had tried to steal was back in my hands. More than that, he now faced legal consequences for his fraud. "What happens next?" I asked. "That depends on you," Patricia replied. "We can pursue criminal charges for forgery and fraud. We can file civil suits for damages, or we can use this leverage to force a settlement that protects you going forward." I thought about it for a long moment. I want him out of decision-making. I want control restored to what the original agreement specified. I want a public acknowledgement that the recent contract was invalid, and I want assurance this never happens again. That's very reasonable, Patricia said, and very achievable. He's in no position to negotiate anymore. That evening, I sat in my office looking at the verified original contract, the document that proved every claim I'd made, the evidence that vindicated every stand I'd taken. Marcus had thought he could rewrite history. Instead, he'd only exposed his own desperation. And now everyone knew the truth. Finally. Completely. Undeniably. The public reveal happened at the quarterly investor meeting. Marcus had been trying to maintain his facade of control, still pretending the forged contract was legitimate. Still telling people I was being difficult and emotional. I waited until all the investors, board members, and key stakeholders were assembled. Then I stood and made my presentation. Before we proceed with standard business, I said, I need to address a matter of governance and legal authority. I distributed the verified original contract, watched faces shift from confusion to shock to anger as they realized what they were reading. The partnership structure that's been presented over the past month is fraudulent, I said clearly. The actual legal agreement gives me final decision-making authority on all major business matters. This has been independently verified by legal counsel. I presented the evidence methodically, the forged signature analysis, the timeline of rejected proposals, the third-party verification, Patricia's legal brief. Marcus sat frozen, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, denial, fear. Colleagues and partners watched him with dawning understanding. His carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time. This is a misunderstanding, he tried, a paperwork error. But his voice was weak, unconvincing. One of our major investors stood up. Marcus, did you forge your sister's signature on legal documents? The room went dead silent. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't form a response that wouldn't condemn him further. His arrogance hadn't just crumbled, it had disintegrated completely. And everyone in the room was witnessing the collapse. No more secrets, no more lies. Just truth, exposed in the harsh light of public scrutiny. Vanessa called that night, her voice shaky with something I'd never heard from her before. Real emotion, real concern. Emily, I had no idea. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought it was just sibling rivalry blown out of proportion. You thought I'd lie about forged signatures? I asked quietly. No, Marcus was so convincing. He made it sound like you were being unreasonable, like you just didn't want to share control. She paused. I should have questioned him. Should have asked to see the actual documents. Should have believed you when you said something was wrong. Yes, I agreed. You should have. The family alliance against you, it's falling apart, Vanessa continued. Mother is panicking. Marcus won't answer his phone. Everyone's questioning what else he might have lied about over the years. I felt no satisfaction at the family chaos, just tired acceptance of what had been inevitable. They underestimated you, Vanessa said softly. We all did. You were always the quiet one, the one who went along with things. Nobody expected you to fight back this hard. I'm not fighting, I corrected. I'm defending myself. There's a difference. We talked for another hour. Vanessa apologizing repeatedly. Me accepting, but not quite forgiving. Trust broken takes years to rebuild, but it was a start. The family structure that had protected Marcus for so long was finally seeing him clearly. And the alliance that had stood against me was crumbling under the weight of his lies. Sometimes truth doesn't just win. It demolishes everything built on deception. Patricia filed the formal legal notices the following week. Official documents sent to Marcus, to the business partners, to everyone who needed to understand the new reality. You are hereby notified that any further attempts to execute business decisions without the explicit written consent of Emily Foster, as specified in the verified original partnership agreement, will be considered breach of contract and subject to immediate legal action. The notification detailed everything: the forged signature, the falsified contract, the verification of original terms, the restoration of proper authority. Marcus received his copy via certified mail. He called me 15 minutes after signing for it, his voice a mixture of desperation and rage. You're destroying everything, he said. The business, the family, my reputation, over a misunderstanding. Over fraud, I corrected calmly. Call it what it is. I made a mistake, he tried. I was trying to streamline decision-making. I thought you'd eventually agree. So you forged my signature? I asked. Falsified legal documents? lied to investors and clients? Those were your solutions to thinking I'd eventually agree? Silence, long and heavy. What do you want? Marcus finally asked, all the fight gone from his voice. I want what the original contract specifies, I replied. Equal partnership with final authority on disputes going to me as founding partner. I want you to publicly acknowledge the recent contract was invalid, and I want assurance you'll never attempt something like this again. And if I don't agree? He asked, though we both knew he had no leverage. Then Patricia pursues criminal charges, I said simply. Forgery, fraud, document tampering, your choice. He couldn't intimidate me anymore. The power balance had shifted completely and permanently, and he finally understood that. The unexpected support came from Harrison, our longtime business partner. He'd been watching everything unfold, had seen the evidence presented, had reached his own conclusions. He called me directly, his tone serious but supportive. Emily, I want to make a formal statement supporting your position. I've worked with both of you for 5 years. I know the operating structure, I know your contributions, I know the original agreement. You don't have to do that, I said, though I was grateful. Actually, I do, Harrison replied, because Marcus tried to manipulate me too, sent me the false contract, asked me to operate as if he had sole authority. I almost went along with it because I trusted him. I should have questioned it sooner. He paused. I'm submitting written testimony confirming that the original partnership structure was collaborative and equal, that recent changes didn't match the operational reality I'd observed, that Marcus's version of events doesn't align with documented business practices. Another ally, another witness, another piece of evidence that made Marcus's position completely untenable. There are others too, Harrison added. Suppliers, consultants, other partners who've noticed inconsistencies. Once people started looking closely at Marcus's claims, the lies became obvious. You're not alone in this, Emily. The truth is on your side, and people are seeing it. I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope, real, solid hope. Not just that I'd win, but that justice would actually be served. The web of lies Marcus had spent months weaving was unraveling thread by thread, and every person who spoke up pulled another thread loose. Marcus made one final desperate attempt at a public defense. He called a press conference, invited local business media, tried to spin a narrative of misunderstanding and family conflict. I attended, sat in the back row, let him talk. He presented his version of events, talked about business growth and streamlined leadership, mentioned disagreements with my sister and unfortunate miscommunications about contractual terms. Made it sound like a simple family dispute blown out of proportion. Then he opened the floor for questions. That's when it fell apart. Mr. Foster, a reporter asked, independent verification shows the signature on the recent contract doesn't match your sister's verified signature. How do you explain that? Marcus stammered. There are technical variations in how people sign documents. It's not unusual for signatures to vary slightly. The forensic analysis says it's not a variation, the reporter pressed. It's a different hand entirely. Did you forge your sister's signature? The room went silent. Marcus's face flushed. That's a serious accusation. I would never. The original contract has been verified by third-party legal experts, another reporter interrupted. It contradicts every claim you've made about decision-making authority. Do you dispute the verification? Marcus looked around desperately, searching for support. Found none. Everyone was waiting for his answer, waiting for him to admit what everyone already knew. This press conference is over, he finally said, standing abruptly. But the damage was done. The questions had exposed him completely. The original contract had invalidated every argument, and everyone watching could see through his desperate lies. His final attempt at public vindication had become his complete public humiliation. The business community responded swiftly. Within days of Marcus's failed press conference, articles appeared in industry publications. Family business torn apart by fraud allegations. Partnership dispute reveals forged contracts. My name was cleared in every piece. The original contract was referenced. The verification was mentioned. Colleagues who'd worked with me provided statements supporting my claims. Professional organizations reached out. One offered to mediate the dispute officially. Another suggested arbitration. All of them took the fraud seriously. My reputation, which Marcus had tried to destroy through his forged contract, was not only restored but strengthened. People saw me as someone who'd stood up to manipulation, who'd fought for truth despite family pressure, who'd refused to be silenced or erased. LinkedIn messages poured in, professional connections offering support, clients reaffirming their preference to work with me specifically, industry contacts asking if I needed anything. The public vindication was complete, not just in legal terms but in professional reputation and community standing. Marcus had tried to isolate me, discredit me, push me out. Instead, he'd made me more visible, more credible, and more respected than ever before. Sometimes the attempt to destroy someone only reveals their strength, and everyone was seeing mine now, clearly, undeniably, permanently. The final family reckoning happened a month later. Our mother called a meeting at her house, demanded everyone attend. Marcus came looking defeated. Vanessa came looking guilty. I came with Patricia and a folder of final settlement documents. Helen tried to take control immediately. This has gone too far. We're going to resolve this as a family. No more lawyers, no more public fighting. Actually, Patricia interjected, this is a legal matter now. Family sentiment doesn't override criminal fraud. Mother glared at her. This doesn't concern you. I'm Emily's legal counsel, Patricia replied calmly. It absolutely concerns me. I placed the settlement documents on the table. Here are the terms. Marcus signs over full operational control to me, as the original contract specified. He retains his financial interest but has no decision-making authority. He publicly acknowledges the forged contract and agrees to make no further attempts to undermine my authority. Marcus stared at the papers. And if I refuse? Then criminal charges proceed, Patricia said simply. Forgery, fraud, document tampering. You're looking at potential prison time and permanent professional destruction. Helen turned to me, her voice sharp. You'd really send your brother to jail? Destroy his future? Over business disputes? Over crimes, I corrected. He made his choices. Now he faces consequences. The room went silent. Marcus picked up a pen with shaking hands, signed every document without reading them fully. It was over. The power game they'd thought they'd won had backfired completely. I had the evidence, the legal authority, and the truth, and they had nothing but broken lies and shattered reputations. They'd tried to erase me. Instead, they'd only proven how strong I really was. 6 months later, I sat in my private office, looking at the framed original contract on the wall. The document that had saved me. The proof that truth doesn't just matter, it wins. Marcus had been forced out of active management. He still received distributions from the business, but he had no authority, no control, no voice in decisions. The company thrived under my leadership. Clients preferred working with me. Employees respected clear, honest management. Revenue grew steadily. Vanessa had slowly rebuilt bridges, though trust remained fragile. Mother still blamed me for breaking up the family, but her opinion no longer mattered. I'd found my own support system. Patricia remained my trusted advisor. Harrison became a real friend and mentor. Sophia and I grew closer, bonded by the truth she'd helped me prove. The legal proceedings had concluded. Marcus faced no jail time but carried permanent professional stains. No one in the business community would trust him again. I'd learned something through all of it. Fighting for truth is lonely and hard. Standing up to family is painful, but accepting lies is worse. Marcus had said I'd already agreed to his terms. The original contract proved him wrong. He'd thought he could rewrite history, erase my authority, and steal what I'd built. Instead, he'd only exposed his own desperation and dishonesty. I was vindicated, empowered, untouchable. Not because I was ruthless or cruel, but because I'd refused to accept lies as truth. The brother who'd tried to control me learned the hardest lesson possible. I had never agreed. I had never backed down, and I was far stronger than he'd ever imagined. The original terms didn't just prove him wrong, they proved me right. And that made all the difference.